everyone, this is Tyler from Craft and Tailored, and in this episode of Under the Radar, we are talking about the Chronomasters. Most commonly seen as like Nivada Grenchen or Croton, but they had a couple of different other retailers as well for these watches, and they're all pretty cool with a lot of different dial variants and just variants in general. So the Chronomasters, or the Aviator Sea Divers, were a chronograph actually produced by Nivada Grenchen first and foremost, and then they used Croton, which was a watch manufacturer here in the United States. They started in Croton, New York, as their US distributor. And that was because Nivada Grenchen had some sort of like legal or copyright issues because their name was too close to Movado, I believe. So they used Croton because it would be just a completely different name. Jointly, they produce these watches that are really cool and just super sporty and very much so like adventure oriented. As you can just probably tell, because it's an aviation watch and it's also a diver watch. It has a rotating bezel. It has, chronograph functions, that they would be most traditionally in a 2-register format for the chronograph. So that would be like your sweeping seconds hand, and then you'd have your minute totalizer. And they just have like a really cool sort of backstory, and then also a lot of interesting dial variants that make them all kind of interesting. So the one I have on my wrist currently is actually a Lamarck, which is not a Croton or Nivada Grenchen. It's a completely different brand. What like Croton and Nivada Grenchen were doing during this time is they would kind of like contract this watch out to other manufacturers, other watch brands, to kind of utilize their platform, but with their name on it. And it was kind of a way for them to kind of get into every sort of different market, because each brand has their own loyal customer base, and that's how they kind of like grew the Chronomaster as a whole. So not only do we see these Chronomasters, these Aviator Sea Divers produced under a couple of different company names other than Nivada Grenchen or Croton, we see them with a lot of different dial variations, which makes like each one sort of unique in its own right. We see them with different dials, we see them with different hand combinations, we see them with different bezels, but one of the most interesting things about these watches is the variance in the movements that were actually used. So we've seen these Chronomasters that have, Valjoux 23s, Valjoux 72s, Valjoux 92s, Landern 248s. We've even seen some with Venus-based movements. So what I think it comes down to is where these were produced and what the most cost-effective option was movement-wise for these watches and each of their specific batches of production. What I really want to highlight is just the patina that the loom in the dials can take on, because oftentimes you'll find them with like these really rich patinas and these really warm colorations that just as vintage enthusiasts that we kind of swoon over, that we love, just because it's that part of vintage watches that really like ticks our box, and that we tend to fall in love with these watches over is how they age over time. And a lot of these have aged pretty gracefully. But I also have this other guy. It's a Croton based watch, and this one is actually a yachting watch. So it has a countdown bezel for the start of regatta races, for like sailboat racing and whatnot. But what I love about this one is it actually has slightly of a softer patina, and I just kind of want to show like the variance that these dials could take on. It is still like a very nice warm patina in the dial, but it's definitely more of like that ivory coloration rather than like the yellow that you'll see more in this Lamarck option. But what really is cool about this watch is just like the color that's in the dial. The color itself is kind of what gets me really excited about these watches, because you see like that it has like this checkered sort of blue and red countdown timer on the minute totalizer, or the right subdial. So one of my favorite aspects of these watches, and both this Croton and this Lamarck variant, are pretty hard to find variants, and they're pretty desirable in their own rights. Their price point is still super accessible at this time of recording. I think both of them are underneath the $3,000 mark, which is just really cool and a lot of bang for your buck when it comes to aviation watch, a diving watch, a Valjoux movement-based watch, or any of the latter chronograph movements listed. And to just find something that is as special as these watches are at that price point, I think offers up a lot of value. But I mean, I don't think it's going to be too long before these watches are reaching the $5,000 or $6,000 price point, especially the more specific variants that are sought after, like this yachting dial or the Lamarck, which is just a very limited run for the Chronomaster just in general, because it was kind of like a more subsidiary brand that was using that Nivada Grenchen platform to make these watches and sell them to their own market. But it's just really cool to just look through all of these. We actually have this book here. It's called the Chronomaster Only. And this is just a powerhouse of knowledge on these watches, from what movements are appropriate for them, which case back, which pushers, the bezels that are correct, each dial variant, and why they're special. And this adds to like the popularization of these watches, because if these watches didn't matter, there probably wouldn't be a book in this depth written about them. And we just love this book. These guys do a really good job of just really in-depth analysis of watches. I think they do the Moon Watch Only book as well, and that's also something that we utilize almost every single day here at the Craft and Tailored offices. But just flipping through the book, just finding just the most obscure sort of references and dial variants for these Chronomasters it's just a lot of fun, because they're not readily available by any means. There's some in here that are extremely sought after and very rare. Singer made some dials for them where you can kind of see like the same Paul Newman print in the subdials, and those are really cool as well, because you're kind of getting an additional piece of history with those. But there's just a whole slew of dial variants and hand variants that are available in these things, and if you're able to hunt down the right one for you, I think there's kind of a Chronomaster for everybody. So yeah, I think that's all there is in terms of why these watches are cool, worth collecting. They kind of have a cult following behind them that I don't see lasting too much longer, as this reference, or this just watch in general, the Croton, or the Nivada Grenchen Chronomaster Aviator Sea Diver, is just gaining a lot of popularity. But I still think that they're at that point that they're still under the radar watches, and they still have a lot of room to grow, just based on the following that's behind them already and the one that's continuing to grow. I think they're going to kind of become a bit of like a household name of vintage watches, if that makes sense. So thanks for watching, guys. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed, comment and subscribe for more content like this, and follow us on Instagram at Craft and Tailored, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.